All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. Mary, do you mind just taking a peek out in the hall just to see if there's anyone else, but we'll get rolling. Welcome, everyone, to those joining us virtually and to those in the room. It's fantastic to have the first session here kicking off the Ocean Literacy Dialogues. It's the third edition here at Impact 5. The Ocean Literacy Dialogues is an initiative of Ocean Literacy with All, which is a project that's led and coordinated by IOC UNESCO. And there's a lot of the global team here in the room, which is fantastic. The first edition of the OL Dialogues happened in Lisbon, Portugal in June at the UN Ocean Conference. The second edition took place in October in Santos, Brazil. Where's Ronaldo? There he is at the back. There's the lead. And the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition, in collaboration with Marsoc Sai and Emma McKinley, I think is here in the room. There she is. And IOC UNESCO are co-leading the third edition. So it's really exciting. This is the first one, as I said, of 7 sessions that will be taking place over the next 4 days. And the goal is to be really intimate conversations. So come on in, everyone. We're just getting started. This is awesome. And we really want it to be a conversation. And you can see intentionally, we're bringing everyone up front. It feels like a living room conversation. That's what we want. And I'm going to just pass it over to our moderator, Jen McCrew, who is a postdoc at the University of Victoria and who's been the lead researcher for the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition over the last year and a half on a couple of different projects, both domestically and internationally. So over to you, Jen.
Thanks, Diz. And welcome, everyone. I'd like to share and echo Diz's words of welcome, bienvenue. Thank you all for coming, both in person, and we have probably altogether about 100 collectively with the virtual participation, I'm hoping. So just with all of us coming together, we're here to really kick off the Ocean Literacy Dialogues third edition with an Ocean Literacy Dialogues key theme, priority theme of climate change. And it's a theme that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And it's a theme that has undeniable links with the ocean, that regulates it, with human beings, with other than human beings that are affected by it, and that we're all living through together. So the interconnectivity of the ocean and the climate are at the fore of governance debates at the moment. And I think that a key question in this is how is the interconnectivity being thought of from the perspective of the influence of the ocean on our lives and our influence on the ocean? And that is at the core of ocean literacy. And I feel that this question is at the essence of humanizing the debates and considering the personal and emotional connections that we have, the lived stories, and the experiences, the social, the cultural, the economic, the health, the governmental considerations of the ocean and its life support systems. And there's a need for ocean literacy research to consider these dimensions and to consider the impact of current and future climate change and its impact on our societal relationships, our relationships with the ocean, and to consider how these dimensions are playing out in our communities, in our lives, in our work. And so shortly, we are going to be hearing from a stellar panel of 5 presenters who are going to share their stories on the ocean and climate change. And we have 2 of them with us here in person, and we have 3 queued up to go virtually. And these presenters are going to be sharing their stories from around the world, from Canada, from Peru, from Spain, from Colombia, and beyond. And they're going to be sharing their stories of climate change, not from the perspective of watching this play out as bystanders, but instead facing this collective challenge head on through action, through storytelling, through intergenerational collaboration, through leadership, and through action. And so following the presentations, we will be inviting you to join in. And during the presentations, we're asking you to lean in, to feel and sit with any emotions that rise up, to let your imaginations run. If you have thoughts bubbling up, if you have ideas, if you have questions. And we're asking you to hold on, to make a mental note of those questions. Because it's through those questions that we're going to begin a conversation about what is important from your perspective, from your communities, about the ocean literacy and climate change dialogue. And I think that the presenters here today, you'll see, are going to be speaking from the heart. They're going to be sharing their personal stories, and that's what is going to be exemplifying sort of the human culture and the human nature that we all have and share. That will be bringing to light the solutions and the innovations that we can collectively come to see, and that will drive the action going forward. So for the first half hour, we're going to be having our presenters speak individually for 5 minutes, and we're going to be knocking you over if you go over, queued up in the corner. And then after that, we're going to have our 25 minutes of asking you about your reflections and your questions. And I don't want to go over to my behalf, so I'm going to pass the mic along. And we're going to start with Kirsten. That's Kirsten Forsberg, who is the co-founder and director of Planeta Oceana in Peru. And I will let her introduce herself and share her story of the intersections between climate change and the ocean.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just twist myself around here. See, they told me that we wanted to be like sitting down, like in the living room, right? So I'm going to be sitting down here. And I did bring a few photos and videos from my work that I would love to share with you. I am a founder and director of a nonprofit in Peru called Planeta Oceana, and we work in marine conservation through community engagement. So I'll show you a bit of our stories and how that relates to climate change. If you want to go to the next slide, please. If you can see that video, we were out with small-scale fishers, and we came across this huge patch of just so much waste and death, really, to be honest. There were critically endangered sea turtles, sea lions, dolphins, garbage. And what seemed to be happening was many of these individuals had been caught in fishing nets, and the currents had brought them together, and the garbage had brought them together. And while we were there, we were talking about the fishermen and how fishermen also now feel that they have to go further out to sea to fish. They can't just, go nearby the coast as they did before. So I just want to raise this attention with this first short video in terms of our ocean doesn't face like siloed threats. It faces comprehensive threats. And when we're talking about climate change, we have to talk about the cumulative impacts that our ocean is going through. So how the bycatch, how the fisheries, how the pollution, how the climate change sums up together in this big threat. Next slide, please. And kind of in this context, I wanted to raise awareness and talk about this comprehensive nature of climate action. When we're talking about climate action, we're not just talking about climate. We have to be thinking about that nexus, as you were mentioning, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of society, in terms of climate. And we have to be considering the fact that biodiversity and biodiversity conservation is a key aspect when we're talking about climate action. If we just think about, for example, carbon emissions, half of the carbon emissions go into the atmosphere. The other half is sequestered by our ocean and by our earth. So that would mean in a way, right, that we just don't have to start thinking about, of course, like different mitigation or adaptation things in terms of just the climate and the weather or whatever. But we just really have to think about how biodiversity conservation can contribute to climate. And within that, what we need to do is think about sources, for example, as blue carbon. If you're thinking about blue carbon in terms of seagrasses, in terms of mangroves, many of these forests even sequester up to 4 times more than what terrestrial forest would cover. So there's a big need to think about biodiversity conservation as we move forward. And there's a big need to engage people. And that's a bit about what we do. We bring together communities and multiple stakeholders in multiple aspects. So on the research side, on the education side, on the sustainable development side. You want to go to the next one, please? And I just want to bring in a few examples of the actions that we've been working with and how this relates to climate action. And this first is a series of workshops and program that we've been running since 2010 called the Ocean Explorers Workshop. And so here it's really about a focus on an ecosystem-based approach, talking about biodiversity, but its relation with the ocean. So we're talking about and developing games. Like, so kids will play in a big board game and they will learn about the different marine currents, and they will learn about how climate relates to those marine currents. They'll learn about the water cycle and how climate relates to that. They'll learn about biodiversity. So it's really about tackling that comprehensive approach that I was mentioning from the beginning. If you want to go to the next one, please. Then we've been running this Connecting Schools program, in which we empower youth to develop their own environmental projects, developing the skills that they need for their own development, and also learning about the ocean and ocean literacy principles adapted to each locality. But also recognizing the fact of how biodiversity plays a role within our climate. So you want to go to the next one, please? So that is, and you can go if you want, just wanted to really bring up that attention, that video to you. And whenever anybody wants to go swim with giant manta rays, you're welcome to come to our field project in Peru. So ocean literacy is not only, as we know, is not only about formal education, it's also about non-formal education and with communities. And so I want to raise another example in terms of giant mantas. And thinking about this majestic species, just mantas, as many other species, are severely threatened by climate change too. There are things that we don't know of how they're going to be facing with climate change, but there are many things that biodiversity may face in terms of changing migration patterns, in terms of changing habitats, in terms of local extinctions, amongst others. So these flagship species, and this is another example I want to raise of the power of flagship species and biodiversity to contribute towards climate action in ocean literacy. And this is just an example. So we went out and we put some satellite tags on giant mantas to understand their migration patterns, to understand their diving patterns. And then again, democratizing science and making sure that everybody understands this. We went to the schools, and then you can see a girl that's actually, doing the route that the giant manta ray took with that satellite tag, which, in other cases, this is a girl from a low-income fishing community. And this is research that she can feel that she is also part of, and that can she be part of in the future. And while she's doing that, she's understanding not just how the giant manta is working and moving, but also what that implications of their environment is, and what if the environment changes. Okay, so I have to finish. So next one. But just as a real quick ending point here, and this goes beyond with the coastal community. So we've been working with fishers and kind of fostering community-based ecotourism. And what this does at the end is contribute to resilience and to adaptation in terms of climate change. And the next and final one, please, just a final video. And you can see fishermen here releasing critically endangered leatherback turtle. This was caught in the fishing nets. And you can see them later when they release it, the sign and expression on their face and how happy they are. So at the end, that's one of the things with flagship species. You end up caring about the flagship species. You end up caring about the environment in which they live. You end up caring about the comprehensive impact that they're facing. And you end up wanting to contribute to solutions in terms of climate action, but beyond for marine conservation. So thanks so much.
Thank you very, very much. That was really inspiring. So in the interest of time, we're going to move to our next speaker in Spain. It's probably almost 1:30 in the morning for news, but she has kindly and really excitedly wanted to join us with her stories. Neus Figueras, she's a marine scientist and author. Be sure to get a link to her book. It's exceptional. Neus, welcome. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Take it away.
So, good night, live from Barcelona. As a marine scientist and author, I was invited here to bring my perspective on art and science messaging, and giving my background that will be talking about the storytelling. Next, please. So, since humans sat around campfires, stories have been used to explain natural phenomena, the meaning of life, important life lessons. And even nowadays, we still use these stories because they are a tool to share information in a way that it's more difficult to forget than pure data. Next, please. Take a look at this example. These two pictures are basically saying the same thing. If we don't act now, bad things will happen. But which one do you think is more difficult to forget? Well, the second one, because we all have lived COVID. So we can compare and we can have a better assessment of the situation. And that's what the stories do. Stories make things relatable to our own experiences. And well-crafted stories with empathetic characters makes us care. And people who care are more willing to take action. Next, please. So what happens in our minds when we read a story? What's the magic of stories? Next. Our minds synchronize with the subject of the story, and this mirroring causes trust and empathy. Next. Then we also experience a wide array of emotions. And when I say experience, I mean it, because our brain can release the joy hormone, the love hormone, the stress hormone when we go through the story arc of the book, of the film. And even good descriptions of food activates the same region in our brain as if we were actually smelling and eating that food. The same with actions. And I could go on all night, but next, please. But let's focus. So what happens? What can we do if we combine our reasoning with strong emotions and with the cause that we all here care for? Well, then we can achieve one way of ocean literacy and climate action. Next, please. So let's have a look at some creative examples of how ocean literacy or climate change are included in a story arc. Next, please. The film Don't Look Up, it's a metaphor of climate change and how society reacts to it. Next, please. These three books are set in the future, and while Margaret Atwood shows us a dystopian world that we don't want Earth to become, the other two shows us a utopian world where, not a coincidence, the ocean is well protected. Next, please. Then Kim Stanley Robinson brings us more in deep, real solutions to the economic and ecological crisis. Next. For younger audiences, we have The Nature of Witches with subtle allusions to climate change, but the take-home message, which I totally share, is that no hero will save us all. This is going to be a collaborative process. And finally, next, yeah, perfect. Finally, River Solomon brings us a story that makes you respect the ocean and is rooted in a beautiful, beautiful story, but with some tragedy. Next, please. So we've seen the power of storytelling, and we've seen some examples on how to use it, but we need more. So tell your story, and you don't need to make a film or write a book. Just talk to your family, talk to your neighbors, talk to your colleagues. You would be amazed of the impact you can have on them over time. So be patient. And next, please. I will lead by example, and I will read a very, very short piece of my book, Lorek, which I wrote to have an example with both ocean literacy and climate change in the main story arc. But at its heart, it's the story of a boy trying to save his family. My name is Lorek, and I come from a group of sea nomads called Moken. My home is among the corals, and I have spent more time in the water than on the land. Today, I'm here to represent the voice of the ocean. What's happening underwater, I can only describe as the loss of paradise. There are people who believe it's useless for someone like me to address a subject that is spoken about too little and about which many don't know what to say or how to approach. Imagine an illiterate, they tell me, but they don't offend me. They just give me an excuse to show the greatness of corals. Next. Thank you very much.
That was brilliant news. Thank you so much. And be sure to note the links to her book. It's exceptional. Thank you, News. Soon you'll be able to sleep 40 minutes more.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, we will have virtually, and it's a recording, Margarita Zatelius. She's a global eco-village movement ambassador and co-founder of Ubuntu from the National Marine Park in Colombia.
My name is Margarita Setelius, and with my husband, Ever de la Rosa, we prepared this presentation to share with you the experience that we have of the creation of the Ubuntu Center inside a community of Islas del Rosario in the National Park Corales del Rosario San Bernardo. My husband is one of the main leaders of the community for many, many years. I was born in Bogota, but I have been living here, coming and going since 22 years ago. We feel very honored to be part of this panel with these amazing experiences and knowledge that are bringing inspiration and information to really revitalize, take care, and conserve our oceans and the whole planet. So thank you very much for the invitation. We are located in the Caribbean coast of Colombia, up north, inside a marine protected area that includes the natural national park Corales del Rosario and San Bernardo. Here is Big Island, or Isla Grande, that is this part of the system, is one of the main islands that have the biggest population of traditional community, and the Ubuntu Center is located in this part, in the south part of the island, between the Pink Lagoon and the Enchanted Lagoon. These are some of the images that we see every day and that we try to preserve and revitalize for future. Our aim is embracing and recognizing, protecting our biocultural diversity, and from it also to protect worldwide our resources and our richness and heritage. There are many people and communities, processes, organizations that have been part of this initiative, and mainly as part of networks of inspiration and mutual support. One of these processes that have enriched us so much, give us so much knowledge and experience, have been to participate in the coordination team that developed a methodology for a participatory process inside a prior consultation of the planning instruments of marine protected area with 21 communities and the natural parks, 6 communities. So we create a process where we could explain to the communities what does these categories of protected area or parks means, and with them analyze, reflect what does they mean for their lives, and what would be the best way of implementing a sustainability plan and a management plan to have a win-win situation. One of the biggest results of that was the recognition of the traditional communities as subjects of conservation. Before we're just like isolated species or ecosystems that wouldn't include humans. So this was a big result of this process. Also to identify the need of training program for civil servants that really don't know about the ethnic rights or how to approach the communities respecting their ways, the traditional activities. So to develop a program for them is one of the results that we are hoping to develop soon. Also the need of support the different tools for the administration of the territories that the community have as an ethnic right, again, as life plans or ethno-development plans for the territory. And one big result was the establishment of the Assembly of Communities. The 21 communities now have an assembly and can work more as a bioregion and not isolated communities. Another process that we have been involved in and have bring tools and knowledge exchange with the communities are different trainings coming from the Sustainable Settlements of Latin America, CASA, and the Global Eco-Village Network, where we have different processes as development of eco-villages, and different dimensions of sustainability. And one of the trainings that the communities find more important and relevant were workshops for conflict resolution or management and no violent communication. That was interesting for us to identify because sometimes we think that I don't know, alternative technologies of these type of things will be more interesting, but definitely the relationship between humans and how to manage conflict was recognized and as a very big support. So this information also give us a way to identify where should we put our energy. Another process was the construction of the Ethnic Early Childhood Care Program. Nationally, we work with the table or the group that it comes from education, from health and different organizations, and with 12 communities, ethnic communities from indigenous and Afro-Colombian, we work to develop this plan in a participatory way as well. Another process has been the creation of the Program of Sustainable Settlements for Peace inside a project called Transgressive Learning. So we, again, in an exchange of knowledge and different types of technologies that also we can call ancestral technologies and new technologies, working with different elders and local experts and the academia, we came with a Program of Sustainable Settlements for Peace. So our aim is that the Ubuntu Center it helps to catalyze these processes and initiatives, multiply the knowledge and the tools and the methodologies, give significant experiences for people that can participate in our programs or co-create different programs. Currently, we're part of a global research in eco-village resilience, again with different communities all around the world, and we hope that that also brings us more information and strength to continue our work. So for this dialogue, we want to bring the experience we have as a center of experimentation and training. We want to bring also that we can create a sustainable local community enterprise that can serve for education, but also to offer for tourism. That is one of the activities that we are doing right now. The importance of learning by doing and the recognition of traditional wisdom as a key tool for change, and the power of community networking to address the challenges of interinstitutional dialogue and agreements. And again, it's very important the recognition of traditional communities as subjects of conservation in our marine protected areas in oceans worldwide. Well, thank you very much. I would like to share more, but we have a short time here. So any question or any comment you want to make, we are very open to talk with you. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for the invitation.
Up in person in our living room. We have Bodhi Patel with the Ocean Uprise and Sea Dragon Studios in Canada.
I want us to all start just by taking a deep breath. So let's breathe together. Inhale and exhale. And I think this note of the inextricable connection we have between all waters, the waters from source to sea, is a constant throughout this conference and many of the ones I've attended. The ocean is my life. I feel no separation from the ocean. And in fact, I feel like everything that's within me, all my cells, are literally biologically, chemically, physically a part of me. And I think we all share this connection. And you'll notice a lot of the indigenous leaders talking about this oneness, this connection. And I think that's essential to center that in ocean climate action and solutions. And this is the basis of all life. So my journey started when I was 4 years old. We live in Jakarta, and I went to Bali with my dad. He took me out to the reef, and on this little balmy before the drop off, there was this white tip shark and a little turtle. And the white tip was circling the turtle, and I was crying because I didn't know what was going to happen. And with tears in my eyes, I paddled back through the urchins and went to shore. And from that moment, I knew the ocean would be my life. Next slide. And growing up, it has been my life. It's been through surfing and connecting with the ocean. I love kelp and seaweed. It's a huge carbon sequestration device. It's a huge fertilizer and feed, and we know it's essential to solve the climate crisis. But now I'm a UN ocean climate solutionist. And what that means is I bridge ocean solutions with young people, civil society, and industry, and find ways to connect finance to all of that, because as young people, that's central to us. Next slide. And so 2 years ago, I realized that young people needed more of an opportunity to connect with the ocean, to obtain ocean literacy skills, and to take action. So with an incredible team at Parlay for the Oceans, I co-created Ocean Uprise. And within a year and a half, 2 years now, we've been able to mobilize over 5,000 young people from 120 countries. And just happening this week was the launch of our 5th internship. And these internships started by myself, just by my boss, my friend, my ocean homie, sending me a message and giving me a call. Bodhi, do you want to lead an internship? I was like, heck yeah. I was 18 at the time. And I had no idea how to lead 24-year-olds that had their master's degree in ocean literacy and governance. But I said, you know what, I'm going to figure it out. And now we have 2 full-time employees. We're running internships for 20 youth at a time. We have a huge application pool. We have educational curriculum all around the world, and we've touched the hearts and minds of over 50,000 youth through our ocean literacy and education. Next slide. And so my journey really has come all around the world, and starting within my watershed, I've been able to bring it globally. And I want to share my story just as a note, because any young person can do this. I'm not incredibly intelligent or smart on specific things. I'm not a PhD scientist. I'm a student with passion and heart, and that's central to who I am. So here are 3 important pictures. One is Ocean Uprise flag after a beach cleanup at COP27. At COP27, we know we established the Loss and Damage Fund, but there are a lot of things that were missing, and the local people of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt didn't actually understand and realize the importance of waste management. So we did a cleanup and we did a little education session before I dive. The second is a really cool art exhibition by Von Wong. It shows how plastic is literally within us, and it's how we turn off the tap. And so I built an educational facility with Parlay, and this is how we're expanding it through artivism. Next slide. And so really the message here is to protect what we love. We're all inextricably connected, and if this is the basis for what we do, we can drive real meaningful solutions. Next slide. And now I'm working with young people from all around the world. My team was fortunate enough to win the UN Youth in Oceans Innovation Forum on an invasive species removal project. And I work at the nexus of 3 ocean solutions. One is on sustainable fisheries monitoring, on-deck fisheries. One is on feeding seaweed, Asparagus taxiformis, to cattle to reduce their methane by about 95%. And the other is on ocean literacy as a whole through my school, UBC, right down the road from here. Next slide. And really, my intention is to grow and to start to kick open doors for other youth. Fortunately, thanks to the support of the incredible Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition and the beautiful DIS, we've been able to bring a delegation of 8 UBC students for the first time ever to Impact 5. And this is just the start of breaking down barriers and driving equity in marine governance, but most importantly, coming together as this inextricable connection drives us. Next slide. And I just want to end on this note that we are all connected. We are all part of this global thread, and we all have a role to play. And a lot of youth ask me, hey, Bodhi, what can we do? What can I do? How can I get involved? And man, I have so much to share on that. And there are just so many ways to get involved. And I'll just end on a really quick, inspiring note. We just had 200 young people take to the streets an hour before this. And we marched to the front of the metals company to say no to deep seabed mining. And I think we can stop this before the ISA issues permits in July. So remember, everything is connected. Like the ocean is connected, I'm connected to a lot of solutions and alternatives, and really, really grateful to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Definitely be in touch, Bodhi. Some of the solutions. Last off, but not least, certainly is Dr. Ellen Kelsey, who is a scholar, educator, and author from Canada. Welcome, Ellen. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Thank you so much. And my goodness, such a pleasure to be on this panel. My mind is racing as I hoped it would. So what I'd love to talk about is bringing, many of the themes we've already mentioned in the panel, but this idea of ocean literacy and climate change, and the fact that whatever we're talking about exists within, a broader realm of how we feel about things. And so there has, within just the last few years, become a whole big movement and discipline now of climate emotions. So how do we actually feel about these issues? And I think it's really important to look at, this is the largest international survey to date, which shows really high levels of deep concern about these issues. And I think this sense of betrayal. And so next slide, please. The point that I'd really like to remind us of is that our feelings are based absolutely on the reality of these true situations. There are these massive pollution issues, and climate change is an urgent global issue. Yet our feelings are also based on our thoughts and beliefs and mindsets and the ways we communicate about things. Next, please. So almost all the news that we hear about climate change in the oceans is in a problem identification way. It's less than 3% of all climate change media coverage even mentions a solution. And where we are now at is people are very aware around the world about these issues, and because we hear so much about the problems and almost nothing about the solutions, we have what Anthony Lesowitz at Yale University calls this hope gap. So people really concerned, but they feel powerless to do anything about it. Next slide, please. So the point I want to make is this one, that we have this idea that if we tell people about the problem, it will involve them in the solution. It's absolutely true that anger and hope are very activating emotions, and that great protest that Bodhi was just talking about is a sign of people being angry about something that's so unjust, and that's right to be that way, of course. However, if we only hear about the problems, we can also become very disempowered. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give you a few examples, and you note that all of them have dates on them, because the point I want to make is part of the way we change the way we feel is by keeping up to date on which things are changing. So for example, just in November, a few months ago, we see this impressive 25 years in the making. And the point I'd like to make is that when we talk about these issues, I think rather than talking about, we're here now and all the hard work lies ahead, if we do this, then this will change. I really want to encourage us to say, because people have been doing this, now we're at this point, and here's more of what we need to do. How do we amplify these successes? Next slide, please. And this one, we're talking about sustainable fisheries. Tuna is the #1 consumed fish in the world. And this accomplishment is another one of these 30 years in the making accomplishments where we need to continue to move in the directions of what we know works for sustainable fisheries. Next slide, please. This wonderful increasing integration between First Nations and Western science. A beautiful example here in the Salish Sea. I'm speaking to you very close to where you are at UBC. I'm just over on Vancouver Island, but looking at the return of sea otters in the Salish Sea, and how do we do that in such a way that honors traditional management practices. So these are, projects that are really in the making and are making a big difference. Next slide, please. And this one, we started with that horrific image of all of those bycatch animals and animals trapped in ocean plastic pollution. I think it's really important when we do those cleanups to talk about this kind of movement, that not only, we can now look at world maps and to see over 100 countries that have some form of single-use plastic bans or incentive programs around that. And now we're seeing the beginning of a big international policy around this kind of thing, convention. Next, please. So this is the point that I'd like to leave with, is that when we're thinking about oceans and climate change, that hope is not a complacent thing. I'm not talking about good news stories. I'm talking about really being up to date on which things have a positive success so that we can demand more of them. And in that sense, evidence-based hope is a powerful political act. Next slide, please. I'd love for you to share your examples of evidence-based hope. And I really mean evidence-based, things that are moving in the directions we need them to be moved in. Next slide, please. And some of these ideas are covered in my book, Hope Matters. Next slide, please. And it's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to the Q&A period.
So much all of our presenters. Put up you all, but I'm sitting left behind. My head is burning and my heart is so full. Also much. And we are going to jump into the question and answer period. But
Yes, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I don't know if it's true for the others, but I've lost your audio.
I hear you, but very low, Jen.
No yelling and no yelling indoors. Can you hear me now?
Still low.
Let me try this one. Hold on.
No.
How about this?
Better.
So, time to dialogue. So, given all of the presenters' thoughts and experiences, their stories, whether it's from a perspective of biodiversity and conservation, or from development, business solutions-based financing, or from storytelling and the perspective of optimism and hope and evidence-based research, there's so much that we can focus on from the perspective of ocean literacy and research and climate change. There's so much that we can be involved in. And at this moment, we would like to start with just a question for the presenters to get you all thinking about where you were leaning in for this session. And the question for all of you can jump in, whoever feels that they would like to speak first, is just about what kinds of questions you feel that we should be asking about the intersection between ocean literacy research and climate change to generate action. From your perspective, from your work, what types of questions or what one question should we be focusing on?
This question is literally my life, so it's always something I'm asking. And I think the most deeply rooted question is, where is impact generated from? And this is a question I'm always asking in relation to the ocean climate nexus, especially in regards to policymakers, decision makers, and people that have a large stake. As young people, we're often tokenized in spaces like this, and it's hard for us to find genuine ways to drive solutions. I'll make this real quick. And the question that I always ask is, how do we generate impact? What does intergenerational collaboration look like in the context of ocean climate action and the nexus? And 3, how do we support young people with paid internships, with mentorship, with finance for the things we need to advance our solutions? Because oftentimes this evidence-based hope, these solutions exist, but we're just not showcasing them. And having people that have done on the ground solutions for artisanal fisheries, for seaweed, having Indigenous peoples represented in these places where decisions are made, but where finance is traded is key. And that's where we drive change. And there are many great examples that we shared, but there are many more to expand on.
Thank you. And I'll just add on that. I think I'd like to mention 2 things, and specifically in terms of research. One, in order to track our progress, we need to make sure that we have good baselines in place. So it's really important to get a feel of, how are we in terms of ocean literacy and this climate change nexus within the communities, the countries that we're at. But beyond that, something that has always kind of like run through my mind is, I think we all as an ocean literacy community need to make the case of why ocean literacy is so important. And there's many people, and maybe even, ocean related people, that don't really still grasp the concept of what ocean literacy is and what it means. And so kind of like building upon that, I think there's a real need for us, and this is very complex, and I'm not saying that we have the answer yet, but I think there's this really complex need to show how our ocean literacy efforts, how our educational efforts are also reducing, for example, environmental challenges. And that's where transdisciplinary research comes in. How do these school programs actually play a role within climate change, adaptation or resilience? How do these, and I'm thinking about this with my fishers, for example, like we've been working with for years, like the fishers that we work with, how do these education programs, what is that role specifically to reduce unsustainable fishing? So I think that research of putting together what we're doing of education or of ocean literacy plus what is happening in the field is something that we still haven't gotten there as an international community, and that we would need in order to further make the case of why ocean literacy is so important.
Ellen and News, can you hear me okay? Or can you hear the presenters okay now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do either of you have a question, a percolating question that's at the core of your work?
Yeah, if I may, I think it's really how do we use big data to really understand which solutions really have the most impact? Because I think we have this belief that it's by looking at what's broken that we understand how to make change. And what we really know is that we can hold power accountable to change when we know the things that really do work. And we have been working now with marine protected areas long enough that we do know which things work. And I guess I'm really echoing this idea that, my big burning question is, how do we make the massive amount of what we do know works really far more accessible, so we can look at trends that are having a positive trajectory, so we can look at what needs to be amplified and tailored to specific contexts in every part of the world in a just way. And I think that, to me, is the issue, is moving away from the idea of a generalized awareness to a much more pinpointed, these are the things we know have the highest success, and how do we amplify them and do them in the kind of urgent way that we need to. So literacy around the idea of super well informed in a big data set way.
Yeah, I agree with Ellen, and I just would like to add that culture is very important because it influences how we behave or the things we do. So I think that we need to look at what can we do to infiltrate some science, indigenous wisdom, and ocean literacy in our culture, because even though culture is something that we inherit, we also can transform it. So let's look at what works and how can we make it a part of the general common sense and knowledge that everyone can have.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all. And now it's your turn. Any burning questions? What is coming up for you? What is bubbling up? What are you feeling is important at the intersection of ocean literacy and climate change? We do have some comments coming in from our virtual virtual audience. Thank you so much. But to start in the room, is there a question here? And if so, I would like to invite you to come up to the mic and pose it either for one of the presenters or just in general. What's on your mind right now? Don't be shy. Cozy living room. Should we start online and see what the question is? Do you want to read it out, Meg? Okay, so we have a question in from Katrina Conn-Roberts. She's coming in from Trinidad and Tobago. So welcome. Her question: in the Caribbean region, we are disproportionately vulnerable to climate change, and we can definitely make bigger actions together. In my personal life, I struggled to survive due to lack of job opportunities and access to funds, especially as a young woman with a family. While I use my little resources and capacity, it is still difficult to find the balance. I spent many years volunteering with many organizations, and only now in desperation, I created my own character and brand for ocean education, which still cannot grow larger due to my limited sphere. How do we support?
Every single organization or business that I talk to, whether it's an indigenous movement, whether it's an organization that works on a technical solution, whether it's carbon drawdown, I ask, how do you facilitate and support young and indigenous peoples and people of color financially and with the capacity building support needed to facilitate this? And this is a fantastic question. The reality is, as young people, oftentimes we're often asked to do unpaid labor, and we need to be compensated for our time. And that's why with the organizations I talk to and work with Break Free from Plastic Pollution, Stop Ecocide International, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, with Sustainable Ocean Alliance, with many other organizations like the Earth Law Center, I asked, how do you create a small program where you get $1,000 and over a course of 6 weeks, over a course of 4 months, you pay this young person or this person that is on the front lines doing this work to not only build capacity for their community, but to support them with the childcare services, to support them with the necessary things they need to survive and thrive. And so central to our work is equity. And equity is grounded in creating a space where people can be included, because it's not just meant for the top 1% to be able to access these internships. We need to make sure that within every single organization, within every single government body, we're paying and supporting young people to be involved, to build the capacity, and to drive real change, because oftentimes these people across the Caribbean, the Bahamians, have a lot of the solutions. And that's why we need to support them in recognizing that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bodhi, and thank you, Katrina, right, for your question. And I totally hear you. As a mom, as a single mom, and trying to, build my own nonprofit coming from a low-income country, with extremely limited resources, it is extremely challenging. And I just want to build upon what Bodhi is mentioning, right? I think that at least now we're at a time where it's very refreshing to hear more people talk about diversity and inclusion. But I've been talking about this with fellow colleagues. Like, I think that us as a system, we still haven't gotten to where we need to get. Diversity and inclusion isn't bringing a token person to sit in a panel, right? It's about what you're saying, like looking at the system, looking at making sure that, I don't know, payments are done properly, it's making sure that those opportunities are there. So I think that it's a very challenging question, and there's no absolutely, easy question around, because there has to be a whole systems transformation change. But what I would kind of mention from entrepreneur to entrepreneur is stay in there, be perseverant. Your passion is going to lead the way. Your passion is what takes you on with these challenges. And the power of networks, the power of those people, friends, colleagues that can support you moving forward, and kind of going from ladder to ladder and step-by-step approach, and being really patient with yourself and with your vision and mission, because it's those two things. It's like the system has to change, but you can be strong and resilient, and you can dream of what you want and put it forward. So and feel free to reach out if you ever feel desperate, because I think we all feel desperate at some point. Thank you.
Neus or Ellen, do you have anything to add, or should we go to another question?
Yeah, I would like to emphasize what Margarita just thought.
Kirsten.
Excuse me, Kristen, I'm very bad with names. But Kristen has said that don't go through that alone. I mean, more and more, there are more people who care. So create your network at local level, find more people that are like-minded like you, and you will get a lot of at least moral support. I know it's difficult. I know that we have to change the system to get more funds, but at least don't go through that alone, because we are on the same boat. I think that at the end we all want the same. I mean, we all want a happy and beautiful place to live. That's universal. So look for support.
I think you're on mute, Ellen. There you go.
Sorry about that. If I could echo, we know that anyone involved in these issues is at a higher risk for burnout, a higher risk for the challenges that face us not only physically but emotionally. And I think this whole idea of self-care and collective care is just paramount to all of this, because we cannot do our best work when we feel so alone. And it does help to know that we're in such a different place around this in terms of people's awareness. We know globally that climate change and social justice sits as the top two issues for people under the age of 25 if we look around the world. So things are shifting in important ways, and that helps to remind us of the resilience that we need, and leaning on each other around that.
Thank you all. What I'm really hearing resounding is the power in the collective from all of your individual stories and your presentations, but also in your answers in response to that question. It's one of the keys to ocean literacy research, the work that we do, and also to climate change and the action that's needed. Are there any other questions from the living room at this point? Any other burning questions? Meg, are there any more online? Oh, excuse me, Dwight, please.
I was really happy to hear Ellen, your comments on burnout, but I wanted to hear from everyone else about confronting burnout and charging people up when it seems so challenging.
The key to staying connected is making sure you're grounded. And I think for me in my life, when I was in 5th grade, I was really depressed. I was suicidal and I didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't know why I was on this planet. And I think throughout the years, finding this connection with the places that I love, with places of water, with places of trees and land, with people and community has been central to sustaining my health and well-being. And it's been central to advocating within the United Nations, within intergovernmental agencies, this power of hope and the energy that you can communicate in addition to the words that you say and the action that you take is just as critical. And they're all held within the same level. And I share this vulnerability in the story because we all have a story. We all have intergenerational trauma that we're facing and overcoming. And I think it's really important to recognize that. It's really important to make sure that we're centering our health and care. And for me, it's as simple as in between class, going towards this big Douglas fir tree and just putting my back against it. And my biggest tip for everyone is reminding yourselves to take a deep breath and also write in your journals before you go to bed. I challenge everyone. That's why I call to action. Get a journal, write in it.
That's awesome. Thank you. And yes, thank you for bringing up the topic on burnout. I feel that the important thing is to recognize that many of us face this. I've personally faced, many burnout moments in my life. And at the beginning, I felt that it was just me, right? And then you finally recognize like, oh no, there's so many people going through this, right? And I think that we're all extremely passionate about the environment and that we care for others, right? We care for the animals, for the nature, for those. But the only way that our own vision is going to move forward for the caring for others is if we care for ourselves first. So I think that has to be kind of like central. And I'm kind of saying this in a way, I try to care for myself as much as I can and value myself as much as I can. There are moments where you definitely collapse, right? And then you're just like going and going and going. And sometimes you have to remind yourself, oh, I do have to care about myself. And so you step back, right? I think it's an ongoing learning cycle. But I think that it's kind of like, and I kind of like felt this when I had my first, burnout and anxiety thing when my daughter was born, and I had this whole organization plus baby plus everything going at the same time. And you go on an airplane, we're all coming from an airplane, and what they say, they always tell you like, put your mask on first and then put it on to the rest, right? So I think that we need to start caring about ourselves at that deep level, because that's the only way that is going to move forward what we want at the end.
If I could jump in there, I think that's why I really want to challenge this idea of pain stories, as even talks about them as being the only way we make change. I think we know that what helps us to find our resilience is compassion, being really aware of what changes are moving in the kinds of directions we need them to go, because otherwise we're actually creating systemic hopelessness, and then we have to try to recover from that. So I really think it's important that we think about what is it that leads us to feel this way. It's not only the issues themselves, which are urgent and really problematic, but it's that we don't hear these other things. And I think that's really important. So I wanted to end on, for myself, on one thing, which is I really try to look at the resilience in other species. So we know, for example, that humpback whales are recovering. Every population but 2 that I know of around the world is in a big recovery. And the World Economic Forum now places $1 million per whale in terms of their value for climate capture. So, we are not alone. There are 8.7 million other species, and that kind of resilience also, personally, I find really helpful, thinking about, all these other things are also happening while we are also concerned about the issues facing those species.
Yeah, I just would like to add that it's very important to find the thing that keeps you grounded. No, for some people, is keeping contact with nature, because it calms us and it connects us to what we are. And for some other people, is writing hopeful stories. No, that makes you think, see, this could go like this. We can do it. So if you imagine it, then it's easier to achieve, no? Or for some people, just to spend quality time. quality time with their family and friends. So I don't know, find what works for yourself and even force yourself to do it, because sometimes we are so focused on what we are doing that we really need to force ourselves to keep grounded.
Wow, wonderful. Go ahead. 1 minute away. Do we have time? 1 minute?
We
Throw it
have
out
one
there.
last question that I think is a good way to wrap it up, even if we don't get to dive too deep into it. But it's coming from Japan. Thank you for introducing us to this wonderful initiative. In Japan, although we are surrounded by sea, there is a lack of learning and thinking about ocean literacy. Please tell us how you've raised ocean literacy and awareness on climate change in your country. It's a big question.
Big question, and we are out of time, but can we keep it short, please?
Every breath we take is generated by the ocean, and water flows through our cells. We were born from a little mini ocean in our mother's placentas. We are inextricably connected to the ocean from our birth, and regardless of where you live, you are water.
Thank you. Really quickly, again, in terms of connection, I think we're all connected as a society, and we all have a role to play, and we all have a voice, and we all depend on the ocean, and we all have a role to play to conserve it and to understand it. So I think it's about bringing people together and having everybody on the table, kids, youth, fishers, politicians, managers, teachers, absolutely everybody, scientists. Share your voice and come together and be a whole community. It's one ocean and it's one global community.
Yeah, I co-created a social media campaign way back in 2014 to crowdsource and share examples of ocean solutions that we're actually working. It's called #OceanOptimism. I'm happy to say it's spread across lots of platforms, moved into Earth optimism, conservation optimism. So the stories exist, and we need to hear about them. What works in one country works in another. And so that's something I find really powerful, is hearing those stories and finding communication mechanisms so we can hear them more clearly.
If you are lucky enough to live by the ocean, and Japan is surrounded by ocean, I would say just put on a mask and go into the water, because you can discover a whole new world without leaving Earth.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you for being here today. And I hope that all that was shared today will continue to percolate over the week ahead, and then the oncoming dialogue, ocean literacy dialogue sessions. Hope to see your faces again, and that the questions that you have burning, that you can continue to share about them, talk about them in your own living rooms, through your conversations here during Impact 5, and just enjoy the week and coming together. Start with self-care, end with hope, and we're going to get somewhere through action. So thank you to all. Thank you to the presenters for your time, and enjoy the rest of your evening, the rest of the Congress, and we'll be in touch for collective action.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing us together.
Neus, Ellen, thank you so much. Really, really wonderful. Neus, good night. Sleep well.
Go to sleep. Bye. Thanks, everyone.
And we'll be in touch soon.
Yeah.
Take good
Bye-bye.
care. Okay.
Bye-bye.